He laughed at her uniform. Mocked her in front of Chicago's richest. A billionaire dared a black waitress to dance for $5,000, expecting a joke. But when she stepped onto the floor, what happened next silenced the entire room. You're about to witness a comeback no one saw coming. It was a glittering night in downtown Chicago. One of those evenings where everything looked like a scene from a movie. The city skyline sparkled against the deep velvet of the night, and the grand ballroom inside the Aria Hotel buzzed with laughter and clinking glasses. A charity gala was in full swing, attended by Chicago's wealthiest, most powerful and most photographed citizens. Crystal chandeliers hung from the high ceilings like frozen fireworks, casting elegant light over the polished marble tiles below. Classical jazz floated gently through the air from a live band tucked into one corner, their instruments gleaming under soft lighting. Waiters in pressed black and white uniforms moved silently between tables, serving hors d'oeuvres on silver trays. Among them, navigating the glamorous chaos with quiet poise, was Kira. Slim, poised, and carrying a tray like she was born to balance the world on her fingertips, 24-year-old Kira moved through the ballroom like a shadow, seen but hardly noticed. Unlike the guests who wore designer gowns and glimmering jewelry, Kira wore a plain black dress uniform with comfortable shoes and her hair tied neatly into a bun. But there was more to Kira than met the eye. Beneath the polite smile and the occasional, "Can I get you anything else, sir?" lived a dream bigger than the room she was serving in. Kira wasn't just another waitress trying to make it through her shift. She was a dancer, and not just a weekend hobbyist. Kira had been dancing since the age of 6. Ballet, jazz, hip-hop, contemporary, you name it, she had trained in it. At 15 she was winning regional competitions. By 19 she was teaching younger kids in her neighborhood studio. Her dream? Broadway. The real kind. Theater lights, roaring applause, standing ovations, she could see it so vividly it hurt. But dreams, especially the beautiful ones, have their price. Her single mom had worked 2 jobs to send her to dance school, the same woman now dealing with health issues and unpaid medical bills. Kira had once earned a scholarship to a top performing arts college, but the living expenses and cost of books forced her to drop out in her second year. Since then she had taken on 2 part-time jobs and a third whenever she could find the energy. Dance never left her though. Even after 10-hour shifts her body ached for movement. She would come home, kick off her shoes, and dance in her tiny apartment kitchen until her heartbeat synced with the rhythm in her soul. At the charity gala, she moved from table to table, topping off wine glasses and clearing plates, every polite exchange hiding the fact that she was exhausted from working back-to-back shifts. Most of the wealthy guests didn't even look at her, not truly. To them, she was just part of the scenery, a moving part of the service, not someone worth knowing or even noticing. The laughter that echoed off the marble walls never included her. The glances she received were usually when someone snapped their fingers for another drink, or asked for vegan canapés. But Kira wasn't bitter, only patient. In her heart, she believed that people underestimate others not because they're cruel, but because they've never had to work as hard. They can't see beyond the surface because they've never lived beneath it. Still, every time the band struck a new rhythm, or the guests rose to waltz, her heart ached. Her fingers tapped on the edge of the tray, lightly in sync with the snare drum. Her hips barely swayed beneath her dress uniform, just enough. Just for her. Because somewhere deep inside, her soul whispered, "You were born for this." Dancing wasn't just a talent for Kira, it was her lifeline. It was how she processed stress, how she survived mental exhaustion, how she reminded herself that there was something more waiting for her beyond tips and minimum wage. So when a richer-than-life voice suddenly rang across the room, a voice loud, arrogant, and filled with false amusement, pointing directly at her and asking something ridiculous like whether she thought she could dance at this kind of party, she stopped. Everyone stopped. The room, the music, even her breath. She didn't know it yet, but life was about to test her dream, right there, right in front of the people who had looked down on her all night. And she was about to show them all just how powerful a dream could be when it never dies, even when you have to serve it with a side of appetizers. Across the room, leaning casually against the marble bar with a tumbler of aged scotch in hand, stood Jameson Clark, tech entrepreneur, billionaire investor, tabloid regular, and self-declared connoisseur of all things high class. In his early 30s, Jameson had the kind of effortless wealth and swagger that made headlines and invited both envy and dislike. He wore a midnight black tux, a polished Rolex, and a grin as polished as his shoes. Surrounding him was a circle of equally wealthy elites, real estate magnates, venture capitalists, and a rising crypto bro who couldn't stop talking about his latest coin drop. Jameson, as always, was the center of attention. As the band shifted into a jazzy, upbeat rhythm, the energy in the ballroom lifted. Couples began to rise from their tables, joining the dance floor with practiced elegance. Laughter echoed off the high ceilings as heels clicked, gowns flowed, and photographers snapped discreet photos of the high society swirling to music. Jameson, however, remained unimpressed. He nursed his drink and let his eyes scan the dance floor with mild disinterest, until something or someone caught his eye. A young woman, no more than 24, passed by balancing a tray with practiced ease. Her black dress uniform wasn't glamorous, but there was something about how she moved. Graceful. Light on her feet. Unbothered by the complexity of the crowd. Her name tag said Kira, but she may as well have been invisible to the people around her. She floated through the elite like a ghost in a world not meant for her. To Jameson she was intriguing, not because he saw her potential but because he saw an opportunity to entertain himself. He leaned slightly forward, his grin sharpened, and raised his voice so that the music quieted around him, as if the party itself obeyed his command. Who here thinks the waitress can dance? The question cut through the air like glass. Conversations paused. Eyes darted toward the bar, then to the young woman carrying drinks. Kira stopped, confused for a moment, unsure if she heard him right. She turned, meeting his gaze. The energy in the room shifted. Jameson pointed at her with mock excitement. "Yeah, you've got a little swing in your step," he said, causing a few polite laughs around him. "Tell you what. I'll give you $5,000 if you can last a minute on that floor without totally embarrassing yourself." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Some thought it was just another one of Jameson's jokes. Others leaned in with interest. Phones came out quietly, thumbs hovering over record buttons. Everyone loves a little drama, especially when it's dressed in money and champagne. Kira blinked. Her heart thumped so hard it nearly rattled the tray in her hands. She looked around at all the eyes now locked on her, faces waiting, some ready to laugh, others ready to feel secondhand embarrassment. She knew exactly what this was, a dare. A public put-down dressed as a bet. A rich man betting against a poor girl just for laughs. She stared straight at Jameson, weighing her options. Walk away and let them win with their smug arrogance? Or step out onto that floor and answer with movement? The old doubts whispered. She didn't belong here. She wasn't wearing sequins or heels. This wasn't her stage. But deeper, louder came something else. A voice she'd felt her whole life. The part of her that danced barefoot on kitchen tiles, that stayed late at the studio after class practicing solo routines no one ever saw. The voice said, "You were born for this." Jameson smirked again. "Come on. Don't tell me you're scared to prove me wrong." And that was it. With quiet resolve, Kira set her tray down on a nearby table. Her shoulders straightened. She calmly stepped through the crowd, which instinctively parted to let her pass. Without a single word, she made her way to the center of the dance floor. Gone was the uncertainty. Gone was the hesitation. All that remained was focus and a steady fire in her eyes. Jameson raised a brow, still amused. "Hope you've stretched," he muttered, sipping his drink again. Kira looked over at the band and nodded once. "Mind giving me a little soul?" she asked softly. The bandleader, sensing what was about to happen wasn't a joke at all, exchanged a quick glance with his saxophonist. The drums picked up. The melody shifted. The music grew thicker, deeper. A pulse began to drum through the air. She was ready. Everyone else was expecting a spectacle. But what they were about to witness was a storm. Kira froze. $5,000? The number echoed in her head like a drumbeat. That much money could pay off a credit card, cover next month's rent, chip away at her student loan, maybe even help her ailing mother with one of those prescriptions that insurance never seemed to cover. The sheer weight of it pressed on her ribcage. But what pressed even harder was the way everyone in the room was now looking at her. Not like a dancer. Not like an artist. Like a joke. Her hand, still holding the tray, trembled slightly. But not from fear. More like a surge of energy building just beneath her skin, the kind dancers felt moments before the curtain rose. Still, that wasn't what anyone here expected. Most of them likely thought she'd blush, stammer an excuse and disappear into the kitchen. They didn't know her story. They didn't know about the years spent in second-hand leotards or how she'd practiced pirouettes in cramped bedrooms. They didn't know that after a 10-hour shift on her feet, she still danced in her socks in dim-lit hallways just to keep her rhythm alive. They didn't hear the voice in her head, soft, steady and always there, the one that whispered, "Keep going. Your moment's coming." And maybe, this was it. Not exactly how she imagined her big break. She wasn't dressed in sequins or under theater lights. No stage crew, no polished choreography. Just 1,000 eyes on her in a ballroom where she was supposed to be invisible. But still, it was a moment. She looked directly at Jameson. His smirk had only grown larger, like he was watching a pre-show he didn't expect to last more than a few embarrassing seconds. Without a word, Kira stepped forward. Her movements were calm, almost too calm. With a quiet confidence, she walked to the nearest table and gently set her tray down, aligning the glasses before letting her hands fall free for the first time all evening. A hush fell over the ballroom, like the calm before a storm. The ripple had officially become a wave. People turned toward the dance floor, whispering to their dates, already guessing at what would go wrong. A few phones were subtly raised, recording just in case something viral happened. The staff at the edges of the room exchanged looks, maybe even rooting for her, but afraid to get involved. Kira moved with slow purpose, the soft thud of her work shoes making their way across the slick marble floor. She stepped onto the dance floor dressed in nothing more than a plain black uniform and a resolve that didn't need heels or sequins to shine. Jameson leaned back in his velvet chair, sipping from his glass like a man settling in to watch a show he'd already guessed the ending to. "Here comes the show," he muttered, chuckling toward his friends, still confident that what was about to unfold would be the laugh of the night. Kira didn't flinch. Didn't look away. Her head turned toward the band, her gaze deliberate. "Mind giving me something with a little fire?" she said. Her voice was calm but steady, the way a dancer commands a stage before the music even begins. The bandleader, a gray-haired jazz musician who'd been playing galas for decades, arched a brow. Something in Kira's tone, or maybe her eyes, made him sit up straighter. With a nod to his bandmates, the tempo shifted. Smooth jazz melted into something more upbeat, thick with rhythm and tension. The sax came in, then drums, then a pulse that moved through the floor like a heartbeat. Kira took one step back. She inhaled. And though no one quite knew what was about to follow, the air changed. Everyone could feel it. Something big was coming. Something they hadn't expected at all. Then she moved. Not with hesitation. Not with fear. But with purpose, as though the air itself had been waiting for her to finally command it. At first it was subtle. A smooth, fluid roll of her shoulders, almost like the music was a part of her. Not something playing from speakers across the room, but something coming from within. Then came the spin. Flawless. Cling. Her work shoes barely made a sound as she glided effortlessly across the polished marble floor. People gasped. Guests who had moments ago been sipping champagne and giggling at the idea of a dancing waitress suddenly leaned forward. Their faces changed. The laughter stopped. This wasn't a stunt. This wasn't a joke. Every beat of the music became her partner. Every note had a place in her movement. Her hips caught the downbeats with power. Her arms sliced through the air with elegance. Kira dipped low into a jazz split, then fluidly transitioned into a graceful rise, all without a moment of hesitation. It was flawless but not sterile. There was emotion, fire, life in every motion. She spun again, faster this time, hair tumbling loose. It didn't matter that she wasn't wearing a costume. She didn't need glitter. She was the spotlight. She was telling a story without words. A story of freedom. Of defiance. Of soul. She popped her chest in sync with the sharp beat of the drum, then slid into a lyrical move that took her halfway across the floor. Her fingers extended like arcs of light. Her feet barely touched the ground. It wasn't just movement anymore, it was electricity. Each step echoed not only in sound, but in the stilled breath of everyone watching. She twirled, using the momentum of her own weight to drive into a final pose, then launched again without missing a second. The room, once filled with polite clinks of silverware and elite murmurs, was now dead silent, save for the pulse of the music and the rhythm of her soul colliding with it. The band felt it too. Their eyes lit up. The saxophonist grinned. The drummer leaned into the groove, giving her a beat with just the right tempo, just the right swing. They adjusted intuitively, letting her lead. The music didn't control her, she was controlling it. A silent conversation took place between the instruments and Kira's body. She gave them everything. Fluidity, power, precision, passion. A woman who had carried hors d'oeuvres an hour ago now looked like she belonged on the biggest stages in the world. And for that moment, everyone forgot everything else. The gala, the gowns, the billionaire whispers. Even Jameson. He was no longer smiling. His smirk had faded somewhere around her third spin. Now he stood absolutely still, eyes fixed not on a waitress, but on a woman whose presence swallowed the room. His glass hung loosely in one hand, unsipped, forgotten. A slight furrow in his brow betrayed the one thing he hadn't expected to feel tonight: awe. Kira wasn't just good. She was unforgettable. There were no gimmicks, no lights, no polished stage. Just pure, unleashed talent. The kind no money can fake, no school can manufacture, no bet can contain. And by now no one was filming. Not because they weren't interested, but because they were too captivated to move. In a matter of 60 seconds, she had turned humiliation into a standing ovation waiting to happen. And as the music reached its crescendo, spinning her into one final breathtaking move, the energy in the room swelled. People held their breath. Something extraordinary had just happened, and nobody would ever forget it. As the final note of the song echoed through the ballroom, Kira landed, arms stretched, back straight, one knee bent in sharp, elegant control. Boom. A perfect finish. A dancer's ending. And then, nothing. Just silence. Not uncomfortable silence, not the kind left behind after a bad performance. It was the kind of silence where the air itself holds its breath. Where time pauses, suspended between disbelief and awe. Even the band, usually quick to strike the final chord, held back for a heartbeat longer. The drummer's sticks froze mid-air. The saxophonist lowered his instrument slowly, like he couldn't quite believe what he'd witnessed. Then, it happened. The ballroom erupted. Thunderous applause. It started on one side and rippled like wildfire through the room. Hands clapped. Glasses were raised. Cheers broke out above the clatter. Strangers turned to one another with wide eyes and open mouths as if to say, "Did you just see what I saw?" A man in a tux shouted, "Bravo!" A woman near the front wiped a tear from her mascaraed eye, whispering, "That was beautiful." Even the cold-faced socialites, the type who rarely blinked unless a camera flashed, were smiling, nodding, clapping. Kira stood still for a few seconds, chest rising and falling with the slowing rhythm of her breath. Her heart was racing, but her face was calm. She owned that moment. Not out of pride, but out of purpose. For the first time, these people weren't seeing a waitress. They were seeing her. She looked up at the lights, letting the applause sink under her skin like sunlight. It felt warm. Real. Powerful. Through the crowd, Jameson Clark stood slowly, like a man waking from a dream where he wasn't the most important person in the room. His confident smirk was long gone, replaced by something much rarer on his face. Humility. Maybe even a hint of regret. He made his way across the floor with hesitant steps, the silence between each one filled with whispers from his entourage. He reached her, pulled out his sleek black wallet, and without theatrics quietly counted out 5 crisp $1,000 bills. He held the cash out to her. "I was wrong," Jameson said loud enough for the room to hear. "You're not just a waitress. You're a star." Kira didn't flinch. She glanced at the money, then looked into his eyes, not with anger, not even with triumph. Just calm, steady understanding. She took a breath and replied, "I didn't dance for the money. I danced because I could." The simple honesty in her voice cut through deeper than any mic drop ever could. It wasn't a comeback. It was truth. She turned back to the crowd, now smiling and beaming back at her. For the first time, Kira wasn't invisible. She wasn't the help. She was a performer. A presence. Someone who took her shot, and owned it. From the side of the room, a woman wearing a sleek red gown made her way forward, holding a glass of champagne in one hand and a business card in the other. "I don't know who trained you," she said with genuine admiration, "but I represent a production casting for a national touring show. We've been looking for someone exactly like you." Kira's mouth parted slightly in disbelief. Her hands trembled as she took the card. "Are you serious?" The woman smiled. "After that performance?" "Very serious." And just like that, the night changed. Word spread quickly as good stories always do. Before the gala ended, several more guests approached her, offering contacts, opportunities, even scholarships to finish her training. Her phone buzzed with texts from coworkers who saw it all unfold online. But Kira didn't dance away with fame that night or land on the cover of a magazine the next morning. What she left with was far more powerful. A new reality, a door no one had ever opened for her before. Within 3 months she landed her first real audition, and nailed it. A touring company picked her up for an ensemble role. Not the lead, not yet, but it was real. She traded in her apron for rehearsal tights, her tray for a stage, and began rehearsals in a world she once only dreamed of. And from that moment on, she never waited another table again, unless it was between rehearsals, dancing under brighter lights with her name printed in the program. If you were inspired by Kira's boldness, smash that like button, subscribe for more unbelievable real-life stories, and comment below what you would have done if you were in her shoes.